Hi guys, today I'm going to show you how to clean off your instrument and prep it for checking in at the end of the year and long-term storage over the summer. There are a lot of instrument maintenance things that we just don't do on a string instrument, and there are a couple things that I'm going to do in this video because I've been playing for like 24 years that I'm really comfortable doing. But most of the things that I show you here, you are totally safe to do, and then there will be some things that I'll tell you to look for that you'll send off to a professional, because a lot of things, even though I've been playing for so long, I just don't even take care of. They would need to be sent off to a professional luthier, who is somebody who makes and repairs instruments. The first and easiest thing is to wipe off any fingerprints and rosin dust. Every time you're done playing, the rosin from your bow will kind of fly off in little dusty pieces and land on your instrument. It might look like chalk, but rosin is really sticky. It's not like chalk. It's very sticky and it can build up on your instrument. So this is something that I'm showing you now, but you should not do it only at the end of the year. You should do it every day when you're done practicing, just to make sure that the rosin comes off, because it comes off so easily when you just finished playing. And if you wait for a long time, like a couple days or a couple weeks or the whole entire year, then you have to use some chemicals to get it off, and it takes a lot more work. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take a really soft microfiber cloth. You want something that A, is really soft, and B, does not leave like fuzzies. So for a long time I just used a random piece of fabric from my house and it left little white fuzzies all over my instrument, and we don't want that. So this is not going to leave fuzzies, and it is very, very soft and gentle. So I'm going to put this right through the wood of the bow and the hair, and then carefully run up and down, because this is a spot where we don't really think of, but we get a lot of rosin dust here and it can definitely build up, and we don't want that. So I'm going to wipe that off a couple times, then it's good, it's clean. The next thing is to wipe off my instrument. So I'm going to get the whole face of the instrument, because I'm wanting not just rosin dust but also fingerprints. I'm wiping everything off. And then I'm really carefully going to go here behind the bridge and in front of the bridge. Again, like I said, careful, because that bridge is fragile and I don't want to go too hard and break the bridge or pop it out of place. Carefully around the bridge, and then I'm going to stick it underneath the string, stick this cloth here, and slide up underneath the fingerboard, so rosin dust can get kind of caked in there. And then I just go on the strings. Now, if you do this all the time and you're being really careful with your instrument, you're not going to hear any sound, and you can feel those strings are really smooth. If you don't do this very frequently, as you start to go here, you're going to feel the stickiness of the rosin, and also your instrument's going to start squealing at you. It means it's unhappy because that rosin dust is totally caked on there. So wipe, wipe, wipe until it's not squealing anymore. And this string here feels a little sticky, so I need to wipe that extra. And then once all of the rosin is off the strings, I'm gonna come wipe up here. Sometimes our fingers leave a little bit of oils, or maybe you were eating before you played and you didn't wash your hands, and you need to wipe off up here. And then the last thing I'm gonna do, holding the neck of the instrument, just make sure all the other wood is nice and clean and shiny. And then after I do that, I'm going to try not to touch the wood anymore, because fingerprints will show really well. All the rosin dust is wiped off. That's the easiest thing, and this is again something that you should do at the end of playing every single time you play. Once you're finished wiping off the rosin, I want you to do a really quick check to see that you got all of it off. So up here at the edges of your instrument, the varnish should feel really, really smooth. Rosin like never gets up here. It's very smooth and shiny. Right here is where rosin builds up. And if this feels sticky and gunky and kind of like maybe there's scales on it, like fish scales, like it's kind of built up there, you can tell, oh, I have rosin buildup. I need to use more powerful cleaning, like a polishing agent or a rosin removing agent, and all of those things are something you'll have to go into a professional or to purchase from a music store to do those. But this feels really smooth. This right here feels the exact same as this right here. So I know that whoever's been playing on this viola has been taking really good care of it. They've been wiping it down every time. There is no rosin buildup. To show you the difference, right here at the tip of this bow, there is rosin buildup. Now this isn't as big of a deal, because this very tip of the bow having rosin buildup there, it's not going to affect the sound. But notice how it looks really dirty and scaly, and if you could touch this, it feels really bumpy. This is what that belly of your instrument will feel like if you don't wipe rosin down every time, especially on basses, because your rosin is stickier and heavier. You need to be especially careful to wipe down rosin every time. This is a bass bow, and it has a lot of rosin buildup here at the tip and all inside this middle, because it hasn't been wiped down every time. All that wiping down the rosin is really the only maintenance that we do. If your instrument's looking dirty, it's a really bad idea to like get some soap and water and try to wash it off, or take a bleach wipe or anything wet. All wet things are really, really bad on all parts of our instrument. If you are ever wanting, and you notice your instrument has a lot of fingerprints and it's just kind of looking a little bit dirty, there is some specific instrument polish that you can purchase on Amazon or at music stores. Make sure that it says it's for your instrument. Like this one says viola polish or cello polish or bass polish. If it's just general polish, probably not something you can trust. If you want to use this polish, and I'm not going to do it right now, make sure you follow the instructions really, really carefully. Polish is liquid, but if you're following the instructions and you're doing it really carefully, you're going to be fine as long as the wet parts, like the liquid or the wet cloth that you're using, does not come in contact with the strings or the hair of your bow. Those are the two spots that, like, anytime they get wet, game over, we have to totally replace them. So after doing that really simple maintenance, the next things we're going to do is just check for damage. This is so that over the summer these instruments can get repaired while you are at home playing. Let's start off with the bow. The first thing I'm going to check is that the bow can tighten and loosen easily. Now sometimes it's a little bit of a resistance, but I can still tighten and loosen this bow with 2 fingers. It's not hard at all. For contrast, this bow, like 2 fingers, it's not going anywhere. It takes my whole entire hand and a ton of strength, and I even had to put a rubber band there for added grip. This bow is really hard to loosen. So one thing that I can do, and here's one of those things that I'm going to do because I've been playing for 24 years and I'm very comfortable with taking care of this, but what I'm about to show you is something that your teacher should do. Please don't do this without their approval. I'm going to take the screw all the way out. Once it comes all the way out, I'm going to carefully put the bow down and take a Kleenex. And notice how inside the bow there's this little screw here. Sometimes that gets kind of gunked up, so I'm going to wipe it off. That could be the cause of this bow's difficulties, but I think the cause is actually just that the bow is old. I'm going to wipe off the gunk. I'm not going to go too crazy. You see I got a little bit of black in there. That's probably good enough. I don't really see any big pieces there. The next thing I'm going to do, and this is why you need to either have your teacher's permission or just let them do it. I'm going to take the bow again, and this part will actually come out, and inside there's the little bolt that the screw goes into. I'm going to use my Kleenex again and poke a little bit through there and just try to, again, I'm trying to clean off the middle and get any gunk out, which you can see there was some black there. Now I know that both of these pieces are metal, so it's going to be natural that there's a little bit of oil. If there was no oil, they really wouldn't screw in or out very easily. But sometimes that oil can kind of get extra things like dust and dirt, and it can get built up. So I'm not trying to completely remove all the oil from the inside of this. I'm just trying to get any big pieces out. And sometimes, when I put that back together, it loosens and tightens a lot more easily. But sometimes it doesn't. Once it gets to the point where the bow is really, really hard to tighten and loosen, it's time to take it into a professional. So once I've checked that the bow is easy to tighten, easy to loosen, I'm next going to look to see if it's broken anywhere. So I'm checking down at the frog. This is a great bow. Nothing's broken here. I'm going to look here at this silver wrapping, and it's not coming undone. And everything looks good there. Sometimes our bows have leather wrapping there too, and if it was peeling, that's an issue as well. So just look at all the wrapping. Okay, nothing's peeling, nothing's falling off. This bow's looking great. And I'm going to check out the tip very last. The tip is solid, it's not broken, we're looking okay. As a contrast, here is a really terrible bow. We don't play on it, but look at how this ferrule is broken, like it slips off and it's stuck. That's something that would need to be fixed, or honestly, probably we would just replace the bow, buy a new one, and stop using the original bow, which is what we did with this one. The next thing we want to check on the bow is that it has enough hair that it's playable. This bow is great. Again, it has tons of hair. We could use this for at least another year. If you're looking at your bow and you can like see through the hair and it looks like there are like 6 hairs down there, it's probably time to either replace the hair or replace the bow. And the last thing that we do to check our bows is to see if it is warped. If you tighten your bow at the beginning of the year and then you leave it tight all year long and you never loosen it, the tension here of the bow hair is going to really pull against the wood of this bow, and it will cause what's called warping. So every time you're done playing, as a reminder, you should always loosen it. So this bow is totally loosened, and you should be able to see, if I have the bow hair pointing toward my left side, you should be able to see a curve here in the bow. That's called the camber. It's supposed to be there. That's what makes your bow do a lot of really, really cool techniques. So that's totally fine. What I don't want though is if I turn the bow hair away from me, I shouldn't see a curve in the bow there at all. So I'm going to put the bow hair now pointing straight down to the ground, and I'm going to close one eye and look down the shaft of the bow. This is how I can check for warping. If there's no warping, like this bow, the bow looks totally straight. It's difficult to get this angle, but that bow is really straight. Again, to contrast, here's a bow that is just starting to warp. So if you look down this, it's hard again to see in this camera, but this middle is starting to bow out just a little bit. Really, this isn't probably a huge deal. I would still play on this bow for another year. I'd have students play on it. But the really bad warping is where you'll start to see, as you close that eye and you look down the shaft of the bow, you're going to see a huge movement out here in the middle of the bow, or the tip is going to just like launch off to the left or the right side, and you'll look down and notice, oh, that bow is obviously crooked. That's called warping. It probably happened because you did not loosen your bow every day, and it usually leads to the bow needing to be fully replaced, but sometimes it is fixable. So we finished checking out the bow, and now we're going to move on to the instrument. First thing, I'm going to check for really obvious damage, like big cracks or dents or holes. I'm going to look all over the front, the back, the bottoms, the rib, all the way around the instrument. Here are a couple of examples of damage that is not great. It means that we should be more careful, but it's not something that we need to get replaced. These corners here chip off really, really easily. And you notice here, this corner is totally chipped off. It means that the student needed to be more careful, but it's not big enough yet. It doesn't get into the inside of the instrument. I'm not going to replace that. Here's something else that's really not a big deal. It's a tiny little chip in the side of this cello. It barely got through the varnish. I'm really not worried at all. This probably doesn't even mean the student was uncareful. It just got bumped a little bit. Here's something that is a little bit more worrying. You can see there's a dent there, and it's starting to get into the wood. It didn't get into the body of the cello. I'm not going to fix that, but that definitely is something to watch carefully for. And if it was any bigger, I probably would have to get it repaired. Now I'm going to show you damage that is a big deal. So those dents earlier, like I said, they didn't make it through the body of the instrument. They didn't cause like a hole in the wood. They don't need to be repaired. They're not going to affect the sound of the instrument. This is different. This viola has a massive split right here and on the back. This was really, really damaged. You can see that this crack goes all the way through to the inside of the instrument. This would majorly affect the sound. All of that sound as you're playing that's supposed to amplify inside the box would just be pouring out of these holes. This is actually a big enough break that it is not worth the cost of repairing the instrument. So this instrument is out of commission. If you see something like this, definitely notify your teacher. So we've checked for big damage, big holes, and now we're moving on to the bridge. I want to make sure that my bridge is aligned correctly. So I look at this two ways. First, when I hold the instrument up like this to face me, so I'm looking at it like this, the feet of the bridge right there should perfectly line up with the middle of this cursive F. That little middle line should point straight toward the middle of each foot of the bridge. If the bridge is too close to the fingerboard or too close to the tailpiece, it means your bridge is out of alignment. The next thing, I want to just see that that bridge is centered exactly between the two sound holes. This is a really good example of a perfectly aligned bridge. This alignment would be a little bit of a concern. So this middle line of the F still points right toward the feet of the bridge. But now can you see how the bridge is closer over to this sound hole than it is to here? And it's causing the strings to be off center on the fingerboard. It would be really tough to play the A string over here because you don't have a lot of fingerboard underneath it. This is an out of place bridge. This is again something that I will fix because I'm really comfortable fixing it. You will probably need to take it up to your teacher to have them fix your bridge alignment. So once I've checked the face of it, I'm going to flip my instrument around like this to check one more aspect of bridge alignment. If you look at your bridge, you're going to notice that it tapers up toward the very tip, or it should. The back side of the bridge here, the side that's closest to the tailpiece, should be straight up and down, completely perpendicular to the top of the instrument. The side that's closer to the fingerboard should have a little bit of a slant. We call that a little bit of a shoulder, and it ends up looking like my bridge is kind of leaning back toward the tailpiece just ever so slightly. The reason for that is every time you tune your string and you tighten that string, it's going to start pulling the bridge this way. So if your bridge already starts off leaning toward the fingerboard, after you're tightening it for too long, your bridge is just going to collapse, and that's a really good way to snap your bridge. So always make sure that it's leaning back just a teeny bit. Something that I've noticed on cellos and basses, and I think it's because there's so much more tension on those big instruments with their huge strings, sometimes the bridge gets bent so wrong, either back or forward, that it fully starts to warp. In that case, I don't fix that. That's where I would send it in. The next thing to check are the strings. So I'm going to look up here where my fingers touch, and I want to look and see if there's any unraveling going on. Our string is actually made up of a wire running down the middle, and then really tightly wrapped around is another wire. And that tightly wrapped wire will start to unravel after a while. Strings should probably be replaced about every year, but I usually wait to see if there's some unraveling going on up here. These strings, all four of them, look totally fine, so I'm going to check the other pressure points on the string, which is right here by the nut. That's where your string gets a lot of force. and down here by the bridge. If all of those look good and I don't see any unraveling, then I'm going to move on. The last thing to check on the instrument are the seams. These instruments are made up of a lot of pieces of wood glued together really tightly. And just like our clothes have seams where the two pieces of fabric join, your instrument has seams where the two pieces of wood join together. Here are the seams to check. There's all along the top and the bottom of the ribs, right here on either side of the neck, because this is a big neck block that goes into the middle of the instrument, and down here by the button or the end pin. Those seams are joined together by really, really strong glue, but sometimes the glue will come undone. The things that cause that are excessive heat, like leaving your instrument out in direct sunlight for a really long time, the glue will start to melt. Or if your instrument is changing temperature pretty quickly, like it's pretty warm and then it goes to a really cold place, or it's pretty cold and then it goes to a really warm place and it changes temperature quickly. That will cause the wood to rapidly expand or contract, and it's going to make the glue holding those joints together just separate. So I'm going to look for separated seams. As I'm looking, sometimes it looks like the seam might be separated because the varnish gets a little bit dark in there, but it will be really obvious when you can see, oh, I can see into the inside of my instrument. That's a separated seam and we need to get that fixed. After you're done checking your instrument, put it back in the case, and the last thing we're going to check is the case itself. Are there any broken buckles or zippers or straps or anything we should be aware of that's damaged with the case? So we've taken a full assessment of your instrument and your case. Now take it up to your teacher to check in and let them know anything that you saw that was damaged that needs to be repaired.